To start this project, I began by planing down the 2x4s on the planer. This was not a necessary step as it is a for shop use only shelf, but I wanted to try out the new tool anyway. This also helped get rid of some of the rounded edges that came with the wood from the store. The next step was to declutter my table saw station, which also doubles as my main work table as I don't currently have a dedicated workbench. Unfortunately, I don't have room to build a full-size table. I began by measuring the current height of my table saw outfeed as I thought this would be a good height for the planer to be at. After finding this dimension, I laid out the wood to begin marking the cuts for the main legs. I then made these cuts on the table saw, which would be much easier with a miter saw as the pieces were too long for me to set up a stop block. Also, be sure to stay tuned for an updated crosscut sled that I'll be making in the near future. You can't see in this video, but mine is not in good condition. Now that the four legs are cut, I laid them out to begin marking where the half lap joints would go for the supports between the legs. This doesn't have to be super exact as I will be using a stop block to start each of the dados on the table saw. I set the blade a little past halfway and began to make the first cut of each dado first so that they will all line at the bottom. This is an important stop to make each of these first cuts first, as if you fail to do this there's a good chance that the legs will not be straight at the end and will not line up with each other when you try to put in the supports. Because I don't have a dado stack, I make this joint by doing repeated cuts on the table saw, which ends up giving you the same result, just with a little more time cutting. It is best to stop and check so that you can creep up on these fits, as it only takes one quick sweep to blow past where the fit should be. On this particular one, I managed to get it right on the first try, which is pretty unusual. After repeating these cuts on all of the four legs, I laid them out again to begin marking the dados for the supports in the opposite direction. It is important to note that you are making two sets of identical legs, not four of the same kind. I repeated the same process of making the first cut for each dado using a stop block to again ensure that everything will line up at the end. After this, it was back to the crosscut sled to finish the dados for each leg. As you can see, this fit ended up being a little bit too tight, but double checking the fit allows me to creep up on the perfect fit. After one more cut, the fit was just about perfect. With the four grooves cut, I quickly sanded down the dados as the saw blade does leave some unevenness on the cuts. I then pressed it in with a hammer to double check the fit. It was at this point that I realized my first mistake. The casters I bought for the planer stand that I'm making were a different size than the ones I used for the table saw station, so the height measurement that I originally took was a little bit off. To fix this, I quickly brought the legs back and made a repeated cross cut on each of them. It was time to quickly lay out the top of the stand. You'll see that at the end I maybe took these measurements a little too quickly, as at the end build the planer actually hangs off a bit on each side of the final stand. This doesn't end up being much of a problem as the sheer weight of the tool keeps it securely on the stand. I like to use MDF for these shop builds as it is both cheap and sturdy. With all four legs done, it was time to cut the support pieces. I took a rough measurement of what I wanted, then quickly set up a stop block and cut out the four supports. The nice thing about using half lap joints is that they make for a really easy glue up, with everything self-fitting together. The problem with mine is that one of the legs had quite a bit of warp that I didn't originally see, which started to cause some issues from this point out. I glued the faces in and then drove them in with some screws to keep them in place. This is where you see the outcome of the warped leg. One side was perfectly level, while the other side with the warped leg was quite a bit off. To compensate for this, I just clamped it together while I screwed down the lid, making the lid create the square surface. I pre-drilled and added 2 screws to each of the 4 corners to hold the end down. With the lid on, it was time to put on the casters. I cut out some simple supports from the leftover 2x4 and started up the compressor so that I could add these onto the legs using some brad nails. I just squared these up using a stop block, then shot in 4 to 5 brads per piece. Going back, I probably would have added some glue to make these a bit stronger. Finally, I could move on to adding the casters. These are locking casters that I use for a lot of my shop projects and are available for a good price at Home Depot. At the time of shooting this video, I only had enough washers to do 2 screws on each side of the wheels, but I later went back with the other 2 and added them each. You can see right here a little bit of movement on the final wheel, and this is due to not adding enough glue on the surface. With the casters on, the build was complete. There was no finishing involved in this simple project, as it is just for use in the shop. I added on the 80+ pound planer to see how the shelf would hold up. One thing I noticed is that there was a considerable more amount of wobble after adding the casters, as there was about 0 wiggle room when the wheels were not on. However, this will still work out fine, as this is not going to be used as any sort of work surface. Your tools on wheels allows for easy movement within the shop and ability to change layout later. Overall, this was a very simple project, but I was pleased with how the stand turned out.
That's going to be it for this build here, guys. If you enjoyed this, be sure to let me know. I know it's something new to my channel, but I'm hoping to start doing a lot more build videos like this, as woodworking is one of the things I enjoy doing the most. So yeah, this was pretty simple but a good project. I love having my things on wheels because you can easily move them to and fro from the garage out to the the driveway here. So I'm excited to use this planer. It's been working great so far. So yeah, if you enjoy this, let me know. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. We'll see you on the next one, guys.